part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
Hey, what's good, everyone? Thanks for stopping by. Cavs on the Break, an NBA podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm John Sabol, along with Sam Amico. You know him from Hoops Wire, and follow him at Twitter at Amico Hoops. You can follow me on Twitter as well at John_Sabol. Follow the pod at Cavs on the Break. Sam, Cavaliers pulling out a nice little win down there in Charlotte. 1-point thrilling victory tonight.
Yeah, that was gutsy. You had some bad officiating.
Oh man,
you had Charlotte getting really hot at the end, probably with some momentum from that bad officiating, and the fact that the Cavs were able to pull that out was really gutsy. You know, without Darius Garland, obviously without Lauri Markkanen, just a nice win after a week that had not gone very well up until that. But winning on the road against a playoff team, that was impressive.
Man, Darius Garland didn't play, but he certainly had an impact on this game tonight. And as we record this here on Friday, February 4th, Cavs beat the Charlotte Hornets 102-101. Garland not playing tonight with that lower back issue, but he did have impact on that game. What, about 4 minutes left in the game?
Yeah. He
gets called for a technical foul off the bench when the play was dead. Who was it? Rozier?
Rozier was thrown up a practice three.
Thrown up at practice three, and he went to grab him. It's like, hey, I'll give him kind of like a little hug, a little tap. We've seen J.R. Smith used to do that here, to guys. And the play was dead. They called it a technical foul, gave him the three, which was absolutely asinine. I mean, come on, how does that even work? That might be one of the worst officiating calls I've ever seen in the NBA, and they reviewed it, Sam.
That's what I was just going to say. That's the sad part is, okay, now the play was dead. The one official who made the call didn't realize the play was dead. So, okay, you made your mistake, but now you go and review it and you stick with the call. What's the replay monitor for if you're not going to correct the call and make the correct call? That to me was just stunning. I think that these officials, and I tagged the NBA refs on Twitter while ripping them. The great thing about being a low life writer, as I call myself, is that you can rip the officials and not have to worry about paying any money to the league, unlike a player or a coach. So
right, absolutely.
Listen, they have tough jobs. They're human. Excuse me, the game goes so fast. It's a tough game to officiate. But what we saw tonight was just absolute amateur hour. And it really swung the game in the Hornets' favor to a degree that I haven't seen. 20 years covering the NBA, I don't know that I've seen a really bad mess up by the officials such as that. That was bad. I've seen missed calls. You're going to have those. I've seen fouls called when there was no foul committed. You're going to have that because, again, the guys are so big and fast that it's difficult. By and large, the refs do a great job, but that particular play, and then you go to the replay booth, and I think that's part of the problem, is that these officials are so addicted to replays and videos and stuff that they don't worry about making the right call the first time because they can go to the booth, review it, and then reverse the call. So they're not they're not as determined to make the right call the first time, because if they mess it up or they feel like, well, we might have missed something, we'll just go look at it. I just think that was just bad all the way around. And I'm guessing that there will be some sort of discipline from the league. And when I say discipline, I mean either a fine, or maybe the ref who blew the call gets a suspended a game for without pay or something along those lines. But you just can't have that. You can't have the refs determining the outcome of the game, and they almost did thankfully for the Cavs' sake, they were able to overcome the refs auditioning for a role in Three Blind Mice, and were able to make those. Kevin Love made those game-winning free throws, and the Cavs hung on for what was a very telling, inspiring win.
Yeah, after that botch call, Hornets went on a 9-0 run just like that with back-to-back triples to put them up 3. Thankfully, that call did not come back to bite Cleveland, because if it did, oh boy, Twitter would be blowing up. Fans would be all upset about it. The whole purpose of replay, Sam, is to make sure you get the call right. And if you get a mistake, you acknowledge it and you move on and you change your call. The fact that they didn't even notice that in the replay, I am just speechless. I have no idea what that was going on. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. Well, even John Morant from the Memphis Grizzlies tweeted about it.
He did.
And said, did you see what's going on here? So he was watching the game. So, yeah, I mean, it was in my eyes, since I've been covering the league, it was a historically bad call that almost cost the Cavs a game that they deserved to win. And thankfully they were able to pull it off.
Yeah, big win, because everyone would say, well, why is it such a big win? You beat the Hornets. They're only 3 games above 500. Well, it's big for 2 reasons. One, the Eastern Conference standings right now in February is just so tight. And the Hornets are only, they're the 9th seed right now. So they're in the play-in tournament. So they're fighting. So the Cavs are only 4 games up on them. Not to mention, though, put the standings and the playoff implications to the side. This game was huge for the Cavs for one other reason. You didn't have Darius Garland in there, and you overcame so many different types of adversity in that last minute or last 5 minutes of that game, where that game was all about runs. It was momentum swings. Cavs were down 9 after the end of the first quarter. Then they were up 9 at the end of the second, or went on a 9-0 run to close out to this first half. Then went on an 8-0 run in the third. Basketball is a game of runs, don't get me wrong, but the ebb and flow of everything went into the Hornets' favor, largely in part because of that blown call. Cavs defense got a little soft at times. Brandon Goodwin's shot selection in the last 2 minutes, very questionable. A couple turnovers there. I'll give him inexperience in that. He still played a great game, dropping in 12 points. So I'm not too upset really about that per se, but it shows the toughness, the gutsy play. Kevin Love stepped up, and he's been doing quite a bit lately. 25 points, those 2 huge free throws with 1.3 seconds left to seal the win. And then I guess we're burying the lead here, Sam. Jarrett freaking Allen, 29 points, career high, 22 rebounds, also I believe a career high. But you think he was upset that he did? You think he was upset he didn't get in the All-Star game? Snub much? Yeah. So
and Kevin Love was. You could see him on the sideline yelling at Jarrett Allen and telling him, "You're an all-star." So, and I think he's got a shot. With Kevin Durant not playing in that game, the commissioner will decide on who gets to replace Kevin Durant. So I think Jarrett Allen's a good candidate for that, especially because the East, as Shaq and Barkley were saying on TNT last night, the East needs another big guy, and there's Jarrett Allen out there, and he probably should have made it anyway. So the fact that he played the game of his life, really, I think he scored the Cavs, first 11 points and 13 of the first 18, and all the rebounds he grabbed and the defensive difference he made. I just think that, he's certainly, whether he gets the call from the commissioner or not, he certainly has proven that he's worthy of the All-Star game. And the fact that it's in Cleveland should help him. Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. I think the fact that KD is not playing, that opens up a spot. James Harden will likely play. He missed tonight's game with hamstring tightness, but, hamstrings are kind of odd. Still a long way to go, 2 weeks away. So, what if he re-aggravates it, or what if Brooklyn wants him to sit out? That opens up another spot. One other guy that got snubbed that played tonight, not on the Cavs, but LaMelo Ball. My goodness,
outstanding season.
He didn't have a great game per se tonight, but he should have been there. But I know there's a lot of good things too with this All-Star game. Obviously, it's at home in Cleveland. good for the economy, good for the city, good showcase. Garland's going to be there as well. Okoro's going to be in the Rising Stars as well as Mobley. So Cavs will be well represented. And I do think, like you say, Allen, I think will get in. But about this game tonight, would you agree this is exactly a type of game in terms of the mental facet of this team that they really needed in order to grow? Because old Cavs teams, young or inexperienced, maybe last year, the year before, post LeBron years, that if this would have happened to them, they would have crumbled down the stretch in dramatic fashion.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, that I didn't give them a shot to win this game. One, because they've had a bad week. They lost a bad one Sunday against Detroit.
Yeah.
They barely beat the Pelicans at home, and obviously the Pelicans didn't have Zion Williamson, who's been out all year, and they didn't have Brandon Ingram, and the Cavs barely held on to win that one in a very ugly game. Mm-hmm. And then you go to Houston and lose to the lowly Rockets. So you lost to the lowly Pistons, you lost to the lowly Rockets, and sandwiched in between, you barely beat a bad Pelicans team in Cleveland. So I was just like, they don't have a shot. They're kind of hit a little skid here. They don't have Garland. They don't have Markkanen. To me, Rondo has not done a nice job, overall. He's had some moments, but overall, he's just not looked good. What are you going to do? The guy's 36 years old, which in the NBA is generally time for the rocking chair. So he's just not, he's not the same guy he was. And
you call it Sam, you call it the rocking chair. I call it the glue factory.
Yeah, I'm a little nicer than you, though. I think we determined that.
Yeah.
But either way, you look at what everything was working against the Cavs. The Hornets were completely healthy with, there was some question whether Gordon Hayward was going to play. He ended up playing. Terry Rozier from Shaker Heights, who plays for the Hornets, has been a long-time Cavs killer. He almost did it again tonight. And LaMelo Ball's having a very good season too. And, they have some nice players around them, and Kelly Oubre and Plumlee is a nice, hustling big guy, athletic hustling big guy. So the fact that the Cavs went in there, like you said, they were down 9 and just didn't seem to be able to get into any sort of rhythm, on either side of the ball. Lesser Cavs teams previously without LeBron would have just gotten blown out or maybe put up a little bit of a fight and lost, but this team just never stopped. And it's so typical of them to kind of this year just always keep believing. We were kind of writing them off a little bit. I wouldn't say writing them off, but saying, oh, here we go. We're getting into a stretch here where they're not playing good basketball. And, frankly, this makes up to me for losing to either the Pistons or the Rockets, because this was a game I looked at on the schedule and I thought, that's just a schedule loss. You got to go to Charlotte, play a good Charlotte team without Darius Garland. You're supposed to lose that game. So to me, it makes up for that.
Yeah, and that Pistons loss almost a week ago Sunday burned me because they should have won that game. They were up, right? And it came off of that big win a few days earlier against Milwaukee where they just dominated the Bucks by 16 points. And
right,
hey, it's hard to get that type of effort and play consistently in the NBA. It's such a long season. I'm not putting any excuses out there, but it is what it is, right? It's been back and forth for the last 4 games now, but still, with that said, the Cavs are still, Sam, 10-3 in the last 13. That's impressive. That's awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So,
yeah.
And you have said this multiple times in your articles on hoopswire.com and on Twitter and on our podcast here that the Cavs have the easiest remaining schedule in the NBA.
Yeah, they have the easiest. I think it's like third easiest maybe in the NBA, but it's definitely the easiest of the top 7 teams in the Eastern Conference. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about how tight that race is, while we're doing the podcast, I don't think the Nets have played yet tonight, but entering Friday night, they had lost 6 straight. They didn't have Durant. He's not going to be back for a little bit. It's going to be nice to be able to make up some ground now if you can, especially if you can give Garland a little bit more time to rest. The Cavs play the Pacers Sunday night. Pacers obviously struggling. These are ways to let Darius Garland continue to rest for a winnable game at home against Indiana, and then I think they go to Indiana. So this is a good opportunity for them to not just stay in the race, but maybe position themselves like toward the end of the season when you're talking about. I suspect that these teams are going to be kind of in a little cluster at the end of the season. If you win some of these games now, you don't have to worry about it so much toward the end of the year. They don't seem like important games, but they really are, because you don't want to go down to the end, the very last game of the season, battling for the number 4 spot. It'd be nice if you can get the number 4 spot a week before the playoffs start. But the fact that the Cavs are even going to the fact we're having this conversation about the Cavs just shows what a successful season it's been thus far, because nobody thought they would be here.
By the way, I wanted to update you on that Nets game. As we record this here on February 4th, they're playing the Jazz right now at the end of the third quarter, and they're down 32 points in Utah.
Well, I would presume that they're going to lose 7 straight by the end of the night. Yeah, and they're already 2 games back of the Cavs right now. Mm-hmm. So this would drop them back another half game. And if you're the Cavs, good opportunity again to give yourself some space before Kevin Durant comes back. At which point I'm sure they'll pick it up. And of course, we've heard the James Harden for Ben Simmons trade rumors that could possibly happen before the end of the week. So before the end of next week, that are making the round. So who knows what's going to happen with the Nets. But if you're the Cavs, just keep doing what you're doing, and you're going to be in a good spot.
You mentioned Rajon Rondo real quick, and we talked about it the night the Cavs got him. And we both said, Sam, this was not a move for offensive production. It's just not. He's not that type of guy. He's not that type of player. It was a move for the veteran leadership because Rubio went down. The Cavs reacted fast. And the fact that they reacted fast to get a replacement in there quickly shows that they're all buying in. So that was weeks ago. And yeah, he was out that hamstring. He had just recovered from COVID as well. He's only played in 8 or 9 games so far, and it hasn't really been there enough. I think his play and what he's been giving them is below what they thought they were going to get from him. I mean, that's safe to say that, right?
Sure.
That being said, his offensive limitations in this with this team, with these young guys, I think is now become more glaring than ever before. And, we were in a group chat, you, me, and Chase and Jeremy Bow tonight, and I said, "Hey, man, Rajon Rondo, or how did I word it? Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air has better offensive skill set than Rajon Rondo." And you know what? Hey,
it's very accurate.
Yeah, but like I'm telling you, he's a liability when it comes to his offensive game in some of those possessions there, and that's why Brandon Goodwin's getting a lot of the play when Garland is not in there, not playing. And not only will the Cavs have to, and we'll get into the trade talk in a second, but I think that there needs to be 2 moves: a wing scorer and or a point guard scorer at some point. So, and I think Rondo is actually proving that more than anything. Kind of like how Darius Garland's all-star resume was bumped up a little bit when he has been out, and how bad the Cavs have been playing,
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we said at the time, you can't fault the Cavs for making that trade. They did the right thing. They went out and got a guy who's available, a veteran leader who won a title back in 2008, and then he won another one a couple years ago with the Lakers in the Disney bubble. So I mean, the guy's been in winning situations. He's been in lousy situations. He's been in situations that were very similar to the Cavs last year when he started with the Atlanta Hawks. Very similar type team last season, a young team that was on its way up. And Rondo was there all the way till the trade deadline. And then the fact that he was available for nothing. I mean, you got him for nothing. So the Cavs did the right thing by making that trade, but as we've seen in the limited sample size, we've seen Rondo with the Cavs. They're playing 4-on-5 on offense when he's out there. He did hit a nice bucket tonight when the Hornets were kind of going on a little bit. Seemed like they were starting to get a little momentum, and Rondo hit a runner in the lane. So that's where that experience and just the previous guy who's quote unquote been through the battles came in handy. But overall, when he's out there, the Cavs are playing 4-on-5 offensively. He had a real nice defensive possession that I felt probably went unnoticed by a lot of people, where he really helped double team down low, forced the Hornets big guy to kick the ball out to the perimeter, and Rondo got back out there to defend a perimeter shot, and the guy missed it. It was very underrated defensive possession. But by and large, you're right, John. They clearly, they're missing backcourt scoring. They miss obviously Sexton, who was averaging 24 a game last year, was averaging 16 a game when he went out this year. And then Ricky Rubio was averaging a career high 13.5 points a game. So, right there's 30 points between Sexton and Rubio. You lost that. And then you have, on top of that, you've had Darius Garland now miss 3 straight games. So there's another 20 points and 8 assists or 9 assists that you're missing. So, yeah, you need to protect yourself for a situation when Garland isn't playing. Right there, you're losing about 50 points out of your backcourt scoring when you factor in Sexton and Rubio. So you need to go get another backcourt scorer. And like you said, it's probably not going to hurt whether you bring someone else in terms of signing them as a free agent, or if you make a second trade to go get another point guard. Chase said in our group chat tonight, Chase Smith said in our group chat, I think it was Chase, said, I wouldn't be surprised if Rondo doesn't finish the season in Cleveland. And there's some validity to that. There's some validity to that, because this is a team that's all in to get the highest playoff seed they can. And, I like what Goodwin's done. I really like what Brandon Goodwin's done. He's a good guy. He had a nice couple years in Atlanta before he came to Cleveland. Brandon is represented by Aaron Turner, who's from Orange, went to Orange High School. I really like what he's done so far, but he's not, he's somewhere between a second and third string point guard. He's not a clear number 2, but he's done some nice things. So good for him. But I still think they need at least one really guy who can bring it in terms of scoring in the backcourt, and they could use another facilitator for sure.
It's funny. We were doing the podcast a couple weeks ago, or about a month ago, when the Cavs signed Goodwin. Remember that? And we're like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
And we looked him up. We're like, 10-dayer. He's gone in 10 days. Let's not even mention him. I mean,
we decided not to mention him.
Right. Yeah. Right. Man, we were dumb. Just like how we picked the Cavs to barely win 20-some games this year.
Well, let's not keep reminding everybody how dumb we are, because
I know
I hear it every day how dumb I am on Twitter. So,
oh man, the Twitter world.
They're often right. I don't hold it against people.
Yeah, gotta love the keyboard warriors. Hey man, it's sports. Everyone's got an opinion. Right. Jim Rome said it best: "Have a take, just don't suck." Right.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But no, I remember when that happened. We looked up at his numbers, and we looked up his journey in the NBA, and he was a undrafted, free agent signee, bounced around to different teams, and you see this every day in the NBA. But this year, we touched on it a few weeks ago during one of our other podcasts, why this year is more intriguing for some of these guys off the street, because you're getting 2 different types of players off the street. One, because of all the COVID protocols. Now, thankfully, this variant is starting to slow down a little bit, and now we're kind of getting back into the way it was before, where teams weren't just taking flyers on anybody anymore. I mean, they weren't going to the local YMCA and picking up the local Sam Amico or John Sabol. However, if they did, we weren't there that day. But I mean, they're picking up guys that probably shouldn't be in the NBA. And then they're picking up guys in the G League that they just needed to fill roster spots. And for a good win for the Cavs, he was that guy where they needed somebody in at the right place at the right time. And now you have a young man proving himself, learning on the fly. I said this before. I didn't like some of his shot selection tonight, but again, this guy's inexperienced. You learn from that, but he's been pouring in, a lot of different, he's playing great defense. He's scoring at times, he's not doing too much. He's facilitating the ball really well, being very selfless. He's learning from other guys, so it's really nice to see them develop these players. We've seen them do this before with other guys, like Wade is another one.
Yeah. The lesson learned here is that, oftentimes how you fit and how hungry you are and, how willing you are to be a fit next to the rest of the guys and fit into the system can be more important than your name, and we've seen that with Goodwin. We've seen it with Lamar Stevens. I know I'm missing somebody in there. Well, even like Dean Wade, we've seen those guys who have come in and been a fit, even though a lot of people don't know who they are.
Hey, one other thing I was just looking about this game before we take a break, because we're going to talk all trade chatter coming up after the break. But before we do, I want to put this game to bed real quick. And I wanted to get your reaction to this. Did you ever think there would be a game where Kevin Love and Jarrett Allen would combine for 54 points, more than half of the points for the team? And after what we've seen,
I surely wouldn't have thought that if you had told me that would happen in the same game and or that would happen in a game and the Cavs would win that game at the beginning of the season. If you had told me that, I thought that's never going to happen because Love's probably not even going to play that much after the miserable summer that he had and the miserable season he had last year. I thought he was done in Cleveland. They were just going to have to keep him and pay him, and maybe he'd even end up sitting out in an Andre Drummond type situation. But his rebirth is not, basketball rebirth is not just one of the great stories for the Cavs, but it's one of the great stories around the NBA. The way he has turned it around when everybody, coaches, not just Sam Amico and John Sabol, but coaches and opposing players and everybody pretty much written the guy off.
Sure.
And the fact that he's come in and really looks like a different guy, not just in terms of his ability, but and staying healthy, but in terms of the way he's contributed and the way his mindset is when he approaches the game. He is all in and is enjoying his role off the bench. And obviously, Jarrett Allen, to me, really the best center they've had in a long, long time, and has really just improved with each season. He really has. Since he started with the Nets, it just keeps getting better. And he was determined tonight. You could see the determination in his eyes tonight. So
with those free,
because
with
he's
with
a
those
good guy and a real talented player.
Yeah, and with those free throws too by Kevin Love, I mean, you could just see right then and there. I mean, he was in the zone. He's having fun.
Yes.
You haven't seen him have this much fun probably. Well, I mean, 2016 obviously, but there were some bumpy roads, in bumpy spots in the road to the championship in that year early on as well. But I mean, here's a guy who probably, if he keeps this up, Sam, will likely win Sixth Man of the Year. At least I think he will. And has bought in and has become that leader for this club when they need one without Rubio too. Those two guys were those rocks, and you're having these other younger guys to lean on Kevin a lot. And I think that that can't be overlooked a lot. And I think got to give him a lot of credit for that. Now, here's the thing too. And what we've always forget about is the relationship he has with JB Bickerstaff, which really started with Bernie Bickerstaff years ago, I believe, in Minnesota. So there's a trust there with those two. I mean, even with JB, I mean, three, but two with JB being the head coach, obviously, but in knowing him from his time in Minnesota and his dad and everything. I don't know if you have another coach in this current situation, you're going to get this type of Kevin Love, because he has a trust in him in Bickerstaff, and he knows he's buying in. So,
right.
I think that can't be understated as well. So it also goes to show what a great job JB Bickerstaff is doing with this team as well, in line for Coach of the Year as well.
Yeah, I would say that you can't you can't understate, and it really it's been one of the things we don't talk about enough. I think it's just because you always focus on the players, which the NBA is a players league, but you can't really underestimate what a job that JB Bickerstaff has done, because so much of what they've been able to accomplish, because you look at things, John, the way, they had to overcome the loss of Sexton and Rubio, and then, Evan Mobley, let's not forget, missed some games with a sprained elbow. Okoro's been in and out with a couple of issues, including a sprained elbow. Markkanen and Love entered the COVID protocols very early together. So there's been a lot of guys in and out of the lineup. They use a lot of different starting lineups. And now, of course, you have Darius Garland's situation. Yet they've always maintained that fight. They've always maintained that belief. They've always had their coach having their back. They've always kept their identity. And that is coaching. That is a real credit to Kobe Altman in the front office, President of Basketball Operations, Kobe Altman. The way that they've built this culture in really such a short time, because at the end of last year, the culture wasn't very good. The locker room wasn't that great. But the way that they just turned this around, and I don't even know how they did it other than sprinkle some magic fairy dust on the guys. It really goes without explaining, but they just stuck to what they believed in, and they never wavered from it, despite guys like me and fans and other teams looking at them and saying, what are they doing? I had some agents ask me, what are they doing? And what is the team doing? It doesn't make any sense. And Kobe Altman never wavered from the plan. And JB Bickerstaff has brought this young team together and gotten them to believe and got them to respect his voice. Both of those men deserve a lot of credit for everything that's happened this year. And I really don't think that, JB Bickerstaff, to me, other than maybe Taylor Jenkins there in Memphis and the great season they're having in Memphis, JB Bickerstaff is really, if not the front runner for Coach of the Year, he's tied with Taylor Jenkins right now.
Yeah, Cavs and Grizzlies, two surprising teams in the NBA, and Taylor Jenkins, yeah, you're right up there too. I think the only difference, and we're not trying to we'll put bias aside here, but I think look what JB has done with less of a roster, with losing Rubio, losing Sexton, and all those guys that have been hurt throughout the year. Markkanen, who's still out with that ankle injury, and Mobley and Garland and Allen at times, and it's just been a revolving door of situations that an injury that JB and company had to plug and go. So I agree. Two good stories and two markets that desperately need basketball to thrive. All right, Sam, let's take a break here. Coming up after the break, I want to go through trade deadline, because the deadline coming up here, can you believe it? After all these podcasts and posturing and predicting and all this stuff, the trade deadline is 6 days away on February 10th. But the next time you and I do a podcast, it'll be over, and we'll still be reflecting on the soon to be Cavs trades that will then be old news, because they're going to make a move, right? They have to make a move. We're going to touch on potential targets. This time, I'm going to give Sam a guy, and then Sam's going to give me the percentage chance of that happening. I've got a list here, Sam. Are you ready for that coming up after the commercial break?
I couldn't possibly be more ready.
Can you hear the excitement in Sam's voice? No. We're ready to go here for the Cavs trade chatter. You're listening to Cavs on the Break and NBA podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary, and we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading.
And from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show.
the sports podcast for the sports collector.
Hey everyone, I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Jeremy Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need each week to get you ready for kickoff and beyond.
Don't miss our breakdowns of each week's matchups, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we all know, Holly, dogs got to eat.
That's right, Jeremy. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Looking for new insights on the Cleveland sports scene with a unique side of Cleveland sports history? Then you found the perfect podcast. I'm John Sabol.
And I'm Scott Sabol, and we're hosts of the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, a podcast about Cleveland sports, but not your typical podcast about the land's sports teams. Join us as we embark on a journey of sharing a unique and historical side of Cleveland sports history with the help of some former Cleveland sports stars and other historical figures.
All right here on the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. Hey, welcome back, Cavs on the Break and NBA podcast, right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. John Sabol alongside founder and writer of hoopswire.com, Sam Amico. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter. Follow Sam at Amico Hoops. Follow me at John_Sabol and at Cavs on the Break on Twitter. But for now, as you listening here, we're going to talk some potential Cavs trade targets. I'm going to give Sam a name of a potential target, which we've talked about before, maybe some new ones, realistic, unrealistic. There's about 5 or 6 guys here. And I want you to give me a percentage chance of that happening. Now, with that being said, these guys are weighted differently. Some guys won't require a young core member. Most of these guys will require, draft picks and so forth. So you tell me what would require it. I think we're all in agreement here. The Cavs' best trade target or trade ammo that they have is Ricky Rubio's contract and their second-round pick and their 2 second-rounders and their first-round pick. So that's kind of without saying which would likely be involved in any of these trades. Okay, so let's go with the obvious, the one that you've been writing on HoopsWire now for months, Caris LeVert. Chances of that actually happening, because there have been some talk now that they're increasing their asking price for him. That is the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, he just had a 42-point game, so it would only make sense for the Pacers to increase their asking price for Caris LeVert. But I would say that it's still, to me, the Cavs are – LeVert's very available. So this is why, to me, the percentage is in the 60s because he's very available and the Cavaliers are very interested. They feel like he's the type of player who would be a fit. He doesn't need to ball dominate to score. He's not a guy who wants to be a 1A on a team, and you can't really bring in a guy who wants to be a 1A because the Cavs have a 1A in Garland, and they really kind of have a 1B in Jarrett Allen, and a guy like LeVert is a willing 1C or even D in the situation. So, but he's a very capable scorer, and he would answer your need for a guy who scores. He's not a great outside shooter, but that's okay. He finds ways to put the ball in the basket. His outside shot has improved, and he can handle the ball. He could even act as your backup point guard sometimes. But he would certainly, even if he's not your backup point guard sometimes, he would certainly take off a lot of pressure off Garland in terms of both scoring and being able to facilitate. He's got good size at 6'5". He's a decent defender. So those things are all factored into it. To me, LeVert is the guy they want. That is the guy that they're targeting. And he's available. So that makes it easy. Now, do you give up 2 first-round picks for him? Obviously, one of them would be this year. No big deal. If you're the Cavs, you're going to be drafting in the 20s if things keep going the way they are. Caris LeVert's probably going to be better than whoever you can get at number 24 in a down year in terms of the draft. So in that sense, yeah, we'll give you our first rounder. you try to sell him on, we'll give you this Rubio contract that's expiring, and then we'll give you our 2 second-round picks. And if the Pacers balk at that, then you consider, okay, do we give away our first-round pick in 2 years? Maybe lottery protected. I think that would be a fair thing to do. Maybe you do that. So it might take that, but guess what? Theoretically, Karis LeVert replaces Sexton. He's going to get you 16 points a game that Sexton was getting you this season, and he's going to be able to handle the ball like Sexton, probably better. He's got size. And next year, you know what? Then all of a sudden you have LeVert, Sexton, and Garland, presumably as your 3 backcourt players, and you can figure it out that way, and maybe Sexton finally comes off the bench. So I think that if you don't have to give up a player from your core, and this is the guy you want, and you've determined that he's going to be the best, again, it goes back to fit, and he is a good guy who's never been an issue in the locker room. He's always been the opposite of that, a good guy to have around your team, and his teammates like him, the coaches like him, and he scored 42 tonight, but he doesn't need to do that, and he only did that because they needed to win. There'll be games where he'll have 7 or 8 points if that's what it takes. So he's their target. I would give the odds of a Karis LeVert trade better shot than anybody else. The Cavs' issue with that is going to be that, yes, there are other teams out there after him as well,
which also could drive up the asking price for him.
Sure.
Okay, so you got LeVert around in the 60s. Let's just go 60% to make it easy.
Sure.
Eric Gordon of the Houston Rockets.
I think the Rockets are probably asking too much for him right now. They're a rebuilding team, so they're going to want a young player somehow. They definitely want a first rounder. Again, to me, not as dynamic as LeVert, an older guy who has value. I mean, he certainly has value. We saw him defending Kevin Love in the post the other day. Even though he's 6'2", 6'3" shooting guard, he was down there playing power forward and did a very nice job, not just against Love, but against Jarrett Allen and some of the other, Evan Mobley. He's a scrappy guy. He can fill it up from 3. He's kind of streaky. He's probably not going to get you more than 8 points a game. He's not a very good ball handler. He's not going to score a lot, from the mid-range. He's either going to get you a layup or a three-pointer. He's not going to get you anything in between very often. So I think the Cavs realize that, and they do like Gordon, and he is somebody who's on their radar, but I would say that's probably about 25%, only because they probably don't want to give up right now what the Rockets are asking. Maybe that price will come down. They can't get LeVert. Gordon will be a last resort type of guy who would help, but he's not somebody that you want to mortgage a farm for. Another guy, personality wise, who would be a fit, by the way, but just not what and he's got a big contract, so that's something you'd have to factor into. So I just think that I think that they'll explore a deal for Eric Gordon if LeVert doesn't work out, but he's not a high priority. So I'd put that at, say, 25%.
Buddy Hield.
Buddy Hield's another guy that you like, younger than Eric Gordon, a better player than Eric Gordon for sure. A guy who can fill it up. We saw that in Sacramento when the Cavs played Sacramento. I think he hit like 5 threes in the third quarter or something. Pretty decent athlete. Not another guy who's not going to help you out in the ball handling department, not facilitate, but he can score. I think that Hield, again, another guy who's available. So that counts for a lot. When you hear of a shooting guard who can get you points, who's available, and who would be a fit. He's in a situation in Sacramento that is not good right now, and I'm sure a trade to Cleveland would be welcome for him. So I would put that higher than Gordon. Again, what are the Kings asking right now? We don't even know what they're asking for him. I'm sure there's going to be a first-round pick in there. What else would you have to give up for him? Probably not a ton because they're looking to kind of gut the roster. So, I would put Hield 35-40%, somewhere in there, because he's probably higher on their radar than Gordon at this point if they can get Hield, because he's just younger, more athletic, and a better, more reliable scorer.
Terrence Ross.
Terrence Ross is a guy I know that the Cavs really like from the Orlando Magic. 6'5", 6'6", pro's pro, a little bit older guy, having a little bit of a down year compared to most years. And that part of that is because, his playing time's been eaten into a little bit because they're on a youth movement. Mm-hmm. But again, not complaining about anything. Last year, he averaged 15 points a game. He can get you buckets. He doesn't demand the ball. Not a facilitator, but he can get you baskets and points from everywhere. Mm-hmm. He's not a knockdown 3-point shooter. He's more of a mid-range guy, but that's okay. He's a threat, and he's a veteran who would be willing to come off the bench. Obviously, he's done that for the majority of his career in Orlando and has kind of been their spark plug scorer off the bench. You could also start him. Yeah, I'm sure he would finally welcome a starting role for a team that's having success like Cleveland. I would put him in the 50s, 55. Probably not as high as LeVert because they don't want him as much as they want LeVert, but he's a guy who could be had. He's got a good contract in terms of, if you're trading for him, you're getting a nice value. And he's a guy who's going to help you because he's a veteran guy who only goes out to play to win. And he's limited in that he's pretty much just a scorer, but he's a guy that would fit well here just because and the Cavs like his professionalism and his approach, never complaining, always accepts his role, whether it's playing 25 minutes or 5, and has shown that he's capable of getting you anywhere from 12 to 20 points a night. That's the kind of player that they have a strong interest in.
All right, 2 more. DeJounte Murray.
I think DeJounte Murray's a long shot. You would have to give up somebody good. And the Spurs, for one, I know the Spurs just traded Bryn Forbes to the Nuggets a couple weeks ago. They are a very low-key team that doesn't make trades in season very often. They've already made one. They probably made their first one in like 10 years during the season. They'll make some, obviously, in the offseason, but during the season, they have historically rolled with what they got, okay? Now you're talking about their best player. Murray has become their best guy, and he may, with Draymond Green being injured, he may get into the All-Star game, okay? So now you're asking the Spurs, what do you want for your young all-star guard? And they're going to say, well, we want your first-round pick, obviously, and the Cavs would say, yeah, sure. And then, we probably want your 2 second-rounders so we can package those and move up. And the Cavs would probably say, yeah, sure. And then they would say, that we would like also Isaac Okoro and maybe or Colin Sexton. And they're just going to price themselves out of the Cavs range. And frankly, I don't think Murray will get traded, this season at all, because really he's the kind of guy that you try to build around. But, there's always things to consider, contracts and all that kind of stuff. And maybe the Spurs feel like they need to kind of move in a different direction, and they could get a lot from Murray. That's the only reason they would trade him. It's because they can get a lot. And somebody, when you see a trade for DeJounte Murray, you're going to say, wow, look what San Antonio did for themselves. You're going to think that they did a really nice job because he's if not an all-star, a borderline all-star and a younger player. So I would put that in I'd say 10% for him, just because you would have to break up a little bit of your core for a guy that you're not positive is going to be a perfect fit. Very nice player, but again, it comes down to the fit factor. and then all of a sudden you're breaking up your core a little bit, and I don't think the Cavs want to do that.
Last but not least, Dennis Schroeder.
Dennis Schroeder would make sense. I think that's become a little bit more intense, the Cavs' interest in him, knowing that he's available, knowing that he has a small contract that expires at the end of the year, knowing that he could serve as your backup point guard. And again, another guy who's been in a lot of situations and adapts pretty well. I think he's proven now he's not a starter, but he's he could start next to Darius Garland for sure. And at worst, he could be playing, 25, 30 minutes at both guard spots. The thing about Schroeder, or however it's pronounced, I could tell you, I've been covering the game a long time now, almost 2 decades, and he's one of the fastest guys with the basketball I've ever seen. I mean, he is just lightning quick with the ball.
Wow.
And that's his main strength. He will create for you. And he's the one thing I'd worry about him though, and I think that the Cavs may have this concern, is the fit factor. How is this guy going to fit with the rest of our team? Now, if we don't have to use him as a big deal, then it should be fine, because again, Celtics are looking to move him. They're not asking for a lot, and his contract's small, so it would be an easy trade. And I think if you gave the Celtics your 2 second rounders, that would be your starting point. You wouldn't have to give up much from your core, and it'd be a real possibility. So that said, I don't think the Cavs' interest at this point is intense. It's more, they have more of an interest in Schroeder today than they did last week. So maybe that'll ramp up right around Thursday's trade deadline. But I would put that at 20%, just because he's not a guy that they're targeting super hard at this point.
All right. So to recap here, Sam, I gave you 6 potential Cavaliers trade targets: Karis LeVert, Eric Gordon, DeJounte Murray, Buddy Hield, Terrence Ross, and Dennis Schroeder. The percentages you gave those guys, I'll go from top to bottom. Karis LeVert, 60%. Terrence Ross, 55%. Buddy Hield between 35 and 40%. Eric Gordon, 25%. Dennis Schroeder, 20%. And DeJounte Murray, 10% chances of them actually acquiring one of those 6 players. Now, of course, anything can happen. There could be a trade involving somebody else I didn't name or you haven't written about. You never know with Kobe Altman. He has thrown he has proven that he can make trades and make roster moves that come out of nowhere that we didn't think was going to happen, i.e. Lauri Markkanen over the summer. So, I think with all these, I know all 6 of these guys weigh differently in terms of the players and things that you need to give up. Obviously, and I agree with you on all your percentages. And I agree with you that Terrence Ross and Karis LeVert are still the 2 more available ones out of the rest, and DeJounte Murray being the complete long shot. You'd have to probably include, and we've talked about this before, I think you wrote about it as well, a Sexton and or a Coro in a trade for someone like that. You need to take someone from your core because he is such a difference maker and is going to have the largest asking price. Plus, like you say, the Spurs don't make a lot of in-season trades, and they also don't make a lot of trades, period. It's not a Greg Popovich style. They love to develop those guys through the draft or free agency or overseas. The one part that I think is interesting, and I pose this question to you. What do you think is more likely to happen? The Cavs trading for a point guard scorer, or will they also make a second trade for a wing? Like, do you see them making 2 trades, or is this just going to be maybe just one trade? Because the point guard depth right now is just has been getting pummeled with the injuries. Because before the Rubio injury, and even with the Sexton injury, we don't really mention it, but they need a scorer, or we mentioned it. They need a scorer, right? But they didn't necessarily need a point guard until Rubio went down. You needed a wing. The Cavs still need a wing scorer. I just don't think they can get both in a trade without giving up a core, someone in their tight core right there. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is they're going to trade for a wing scorer. Obviously, again, the reason they like LeVert is because he can do both. He can help with the ball handling, and he can be your wing scorer. Frankly, the guy plays anywhere from small forward, shooting guard, point guard.
Yeah.
Those three positions, he's kind of got, helping you cover. Right now, if the Cavs had Karis LeVert on the team, he'd be doing what Cedi Osman does, only a lot better, because that's not Cedi's role. Cedi can't play point guard, whereas LeVert would come in and be playing point guard right now with Darius Garland out. So that's why you like him. There are other guys in the league like him. I don't know them off the top of my head or if they're available, but there are other players out there like that.
There's always guys like that. There are always someone available that we're not mentioning. These are just guys that you've written about, guys that you've heard about, people that we see in trade chatter that I just kind of mentioned. There's always somebody. And the thing about LeVert is this is a guy that, like you mentioned, is a good character guy, and he could fit in this roster. This isn't just a stopgap for this season. Karis LeVert, we've talked about it before in other podcast episodes. Karis LeVert's contract, he's in for the next, it would be a season and a half. He's under contract next year. He would be unrestricted free agent following the 2023 season. So you, in essence, be getting him now for a season and a half at about $17 million or $18.7 million next year, because his $17.5 million he's getting paid this year is, be cut in half because of the season's half over. So, if you think about it, you got a year and a half to figure out if he meshes in with your group to either try to resign him or not. Maybe by that time, the Cavs cap situation could be a little bit better. And if it works, at that time, he's 29, you could potentially then, sign him to a longer or midterm deal.
Yeah. And I think what's going to happen, if you want my prediction, is that they're going to make a trade for a wing type player. I think that's probably going to be their trade. They're going to give Goodwin every opportunity to keep this going.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chance that they could make a trade. I think they're either going to trade for Karis LeVert or somebody we didn't mention. That's just the way they operate.
Right.
I think that's just the way Kobe Altman does it. He's always got the element of surprise. So I think that it'll either be LeVert or it will be for somebody who probably isn't on anybody's radar right now, because that's often the way that Kobe Altman does it. So I think they are going to make that trade where they can bring in somebody for a first rounder, Rubio's contract, and the 2 second rounders. Mm-hmm. I think that's what they're going to, this is what we're giving you, and this is it. And they'll be able to get somebody decent for that. Okay. Now, if Indiana really pushes, they really want LeVert, they'll throw in another first. They may not want it, it'll be lottery protected or whatever, but they'll throw it in eventually. If that doesn't happen, it doesn't work out that way, then they're gonna go after somebody we probably don't know about. Maybe Ross could be the guy. But if they do get that wing player, there's a possibility they make a second trade for a point guard. I think the odds are less of that than them kind of either waiting out the buyout market for a veteran, mm-hmm. which would be just a week after the trade deadline, maybe even a couple days. And the trade deadline's Thursday, by the way, everybody, at 3:00. You have to have made all your trades by then. And if not, then you start hunting down the buyout market. And I think that they'll either get somebody on the buyout market so my point is they are going to look to bring in 2 new players, and they'll probably both be backcourt players. At least one of them will be a backcourt player who can handle the ball, and the other one will be a wing or a shooting guard or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one, Sam, because if you can get someone like a LeVert and then maybe a secondary player like a Ross, it's a win-win. Here's 2 more questions before we wrap up this episode. One, everyone, all these fans on Twitter all keep saying, the Cavs can't give up a first-round pick. They can't do that. Well, let me just tell you something. This draft is relatively weak, okay? Secondly, you're in win-now mode. Thirdly, perhaps even more important than my first 2 points, the Cavs, if they continue to play well, they're going to be a top 4 team. Therefore, that first round pick is going to be late in the first round. Therefore, it's basically like an early second round pick, which means absolutely nothing. You're not going to get a game-changing player there. So why not just deal it? Do you agree?
They're going to get mad at me for saying this. They don't want that pick.
They don't. No.
They don't want to be in a position where they feel like we have to add another young guy. You know how many? I mean, look at. They had Colin Sexton. Then they had 3 first-round picks the following year, in which they got Garland and Windler and Kevin Porter Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had Okoro, right?
Yeah.
So there's right there is 5. Then you had Mobley. There's 6 lottery picks in 4 years. If you are still worried about your first-round pick after that, guess who you are? You're the Sacramento Kings. They don't want the pick. They don't want to get another young guy to come in that they guaranteed the salary to, that's drafted at 24 or 25. When you have guys like Lamar Stevens, who, even though he wasn't drafted, is like a 24th, 25th pick based on the way he's playing. The Cavs, I'm telling you, and I'm telling our listeners, if they have that pick at the draft, they're going to trade it. They're going to trade it into the second round. They don't want to guarantee another young player salary when they have a very young core. There are a lot of teams who that are good teams that have the picks 25 or say even 23 through 29 or 30. They don't want those picks. No. They would rather draft at 31.
Yeah.
Then that way you get a young player. You don't have to guarantee his salary. He has to come in and make the team.
Yeah, it's a non-guaranteed contract at that
right
point.
There.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, the Cavs do not want that pick. They're going to look to give it away. And by give it away, I mean they're going to want something for it, but they don't want that pick. They want a player who's been in the league a little bit, is going to be a fit and can prove himself. And if they can't find that using the pick before the trade deadline, they'll trade it before the draft. They'll trade it on draft night. They'll draft somebody for somebody else. And they're so any fan that says, you can't trade that pick, you better get over it, because they're not going to have that pick come draft time.
Which why I think the Eric Gordon situation is very intriguing, because you have Houston, who is in rebuilding mode, who's super young team, and Eric Gordon, I mean, he's an older guy making a ton of money. If you get rid of him, you're taking on his money, his salary, and then you're getting another draft pick. I think that's what's very intriguing for Houston. I think that the fact that they're asking a lot what they want out of him is, I get it. But I don't think they're going to, I understand it, but I don't think they're really going to get the moon and the stars. They may just get the moon, and that moon may be the Cavs' first round pick if that happens. Talk about money, and you talk about holding a roster spot. The second part of that question, Sam, is we don't know for sure. Do the Cavs want to add more salary? Because where are they at right now under the cap? They're about what, 3? They're close, aren't they?
They don't want to add a lot of salary, and they can't add a lot of salary. They don't want to pay, the tax to the point where, it's embarrassing, because you're just a playoff team. You're not a championship team. You're a playoff team, and that's okay. Nobody saw that coming, but you have to be wise about your spending when you do that. So they fully intend to do that. They don't want to lock themselves into something that's going to hurt them and handcuff them financially. Mm-hmm. So that's something that's going to be considered at the deadline, and Kobe Altman, when he has a trade and he goes to Dan Gilbert and, okay, can we do this? Are we going to do this? And Dan Gilbert usually says, okay. But Kobe Altman will be wise about it when it comes to that. And that's something that they'll consider a lot ahead of the deadline, is how's this guy not only fit on the court and in the locker room, but how's he fit under the salary cap and financially, and is it going to hurt us? Maybe this year you take a hit if you have to, but you don't want to take, repeater offender tax and all that kind of stuff moving forward. For those who don't really follow the salary cap, just know that the Cavs get taxed. There's an actual salary cap. And if the Cavs go over that, they get hit with fines, and then if you go over that repeatedly, you get hit with huge fines for being a repeat offender of going over the cap. So they want to avoid that at all costs.
Which happened a lot in the LeBron years. By the way, it just as we talk about salary cap, I am no capologist, if you will. I'm just kind of reading here. According to the Spotrac, the Cavs are $22 million over the cap, so they're paying $22 million in luxury tax. But that's not a big deal when you think about. There's only, if this is accurate, and if I'm reading this correctly, there's only one team that's under the cap. The Thunder. Is that right?
I mean, the Thunder just got under, yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts. Pelicans are only $4 million over, so it's, hey, it's the NBA. You're basically playing with monopoly money, unless you're Dan Gilbert and you're the owner, right? But it's a loose system. I only asked that question because you do have so much money. The Cavs are, I think, 12th highest payroll in the league right now. A lot of that's a bloated contract from Kevin Love, which will come off, by the way, in a year and a half. Which would be the same time Karis LeVert's contract is also up, and LeVert is making $10 million less than Kevin Love. Interesting, similarities there, or not similarities.
A lot of interesting stuff that could happen there. Obviously, Colin Sexton too, going to be a restricted free agent. You're going to have to re-sign him at the end of the season. So there's a lot of financial things that they'll consider and. That they'll have to worry about during the off season. But right now is a time to say, let's secure our spot in the top 5 or 6 in the Eastern Conference, get our young guys in, get them a taste of playoffs, maybe win a round. And that's the best thing can happen. It's the best thing can happen is these guys getting into the playoffs and getting a taste of playoff basketball, because it's different than the regular season. It really is. Yeah.
You'd want this team to win at least one series, lose the second, be basically turned into the Phoenix Suns in, the grand scheme of things would be great, because you're a young team, you come out of nowhere, you do some damage, you prove people wrong. Then the next year you come back and now you got a target on your back and you either sink or swim. And for like Phoenix, for instance, they're thriving. The Cavs, to me, have a very similar makeup in terms of that. And I know you kind of agree with that too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, generally you have to, unless you get, LeBron James at 2014, LeBron James just deciding to come back to Cleveland just for the heck of it, which I think happens once every 100 years. That's a player just deciding he wants to come play for Cleveland.
It also has to have a full moon, Sam. 100 years and a full moon.
Well, it has to be that same night, sure.
Right.
But the way to build, aside from that, to me, really, you look at the Milwaukee Bucks, okay? They finish with the best record 2 years in a row. They get in the playoffs. Well, you go through those growing pains in the playoffs, you stumble and you feel the effect of that. And then you're the Bucks, you get back to the playoffs, you do it again, you get a round further and you stumble again. And then the next year you get to the finals and then you see anything can happen. Same thing with the Phoenix Suns. Their rise was a little quicker because they had a Chris Paul. The Cavs could look to do something like that, eventually. Not Chris Paul, but a player like that, regardless of position, who can come in and kind of push you up to that, hey, all of a sudden now we're Eastern Conference finalists, we're Eastern Conference champs, we're back in the finals without LeBron. But usually, and I think the road that they're taking is, let's take this one step at a time, get to the playoffs. That's our first mission. Then you win a round. Then you win 2 rounds. Then you get to the finals. You kind of got to push your way through as you age together and as your core matures together. That's a great way to get in the playoffs or get to the finals. And we've seen that. We saw that with Phoenix. We saw it with Milwaukee. We saw it last year with Atlanta, getting to the Eastern Conference Finals the way they did. The NBA has become less of a, super duper star driven league as much as it is a team. Now, all those teams have nice stars. Obviously, Atlanta with Trae Young and Milwaukee with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Phoenix. Phoenix is obviously the team that we're comparing them to with a Chris Paul and a Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton's a nice player. So, but they don't have anybody who's going to make you say, that guy Phoenix, that guy's not LeBron, that guy's like LeBron James, or that guy's Kawhi Leonard, or that guy's Kevin Durant. You can get to the finals now and maybe steal something special without a super duper star. And we've seen that over the past couple of seasons in the NBA. And I think that's the way the league is going. And it's nice that the league's going that way, because that's the type of team the Cavs are. So, yeah, you know what? For this year, just get in the playoffs. And guess what? You gave your fans a regular season full of fun. And to me, that's the second best thing to winning a title. Not finishing second, giving your fans a season full of fun. If you're not going to win the championship, if you're not going to be that one team out of 30 that wins the title, the next best thing you can be is an exciting up-and-coming team like the Cavs are, who just gave their fans just, 6-8 months of enjoyment of watching good pro basketball in Cleveland.
And if tonight's game is any indication of how the rest of the season is going to go, buckle up, Cavs fans, because this team is in it for the long haul. We've been talking about it all season long, and it's been fun, Sam. It's been fun. We didn't think it was going to be this fun, especially being such a young team. But you know what? They're poised to go to the playoffs for the first time since obviously LeBron, but the first time without a LeBron on a team since 1997-98 season. How about that? They're on pace to do that.
I was only 150 years old then.
Oh, you're 148. Come on. You're giving yourself 2 years.
Yeah, I'm close. Right?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this edition of Cavs on the Break and NBA podcast up here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Remember, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. Subscribe to us on Apple, on Spotify. If you can, write a little review, rate us. We'd love to get your feedback. Tweet at us. Remember, you can follow Sam at Amico Hoops on Twitter. Follow and read him on hoopswire.com. Sam is going to be a busy man in the next 6 days with this trade deadline. You're going to get your entire NBA fix there on his website. Next time we chat, Sam, Cavs are going to be making a move. At least we hope they will. They need to. Remember, follow us on this Cavs pod at Cavs on the Break. Follow me on Twitter at John_Sabol, right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Sam, next time you and I talk on the pod, we're hoping the Cavs make a nice move or two. We shall see. But let's go Cavs. Let's see what they can do. Kobe, wave that magic wand again and bring us someone good, right?
Sounds good. We will chat at you soon. I'm going to start getting busy on trade deadline work probably first thing in the morning.
Ooh, already. The grind is starting already. All right, Sam, thanks a lot. Thanks for listening, everyone. That time of the show now, we say goodbye. Mike Breen, take us out.
Congratulations, Cleveland. Your decades-long wait is finally over. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.